What I wish I knew before I started studying architecture. Number one, you don't have to go to university to become a licensed architect in Australia. Let's look at it here. We have the Australian accredited qualification, that's university. Overseas qualification, that's if you're qualified overseas. There's the New South Wales ARB Portfolio Program of Assessment, the AACA National Program of Assessment, and then if you're an overseas or local experienced practitioner, and that's the main one to focus on, essentially means you could have 10 or so years of experience, and then you come in and you say, well, I'm just as qualified to run an architectural practice and make the same decisions as the person who took 5 years of study and then 2 years of full-time work at an architectural practice. The caveat is that they must be practitioners with experience at the executive level in complex projects. So the chances are the easiest pathway through to becoming a licensed architect is by going through the university, and that's why most people decide to take that path. Number two, award rates are effectively your minimum wage, which all industries use for graduate architects. Yep. I'll get into that at the end of the video because that is perhaps the most important deciding factor for most people entering the architecture profession in Australia. Number three, HECS debt. I'll be blunt, by the end of your studies expect it to be around 40,000 Australian dollars. I am anticipating some inflation, so perhaps that could be even more after 5 years of full-time. You can expect a starting salary of around 55,000 per year, although Glassdoor.com, a website telling you average salaries based off people's reviews, says you can expect closer to 65,000 or so. I personally don't think that's true. I think it's lower. Compare that with most other jobs like, say, a forklift driver making more than $100,000 a year, or a tugboat driver making over $110,000 a year, or an entry-level plumber averaging $66,000 without having to take any student debt. A positive, if you can, there is a 10% discount if you pay to study up front rather than take on HECS debt. It's effectively tax-free. Unfortunately, I didn't have the ability to do that, so I'm in a lot of debt that I'm going to be paying off for some time, but that's a standard experience for most students. Number four, after university, concept design makes up about 5% of the job. Documentation and legalities make up most of the rest in your time. The rest is administration, warranty, specifications, building standards, documentation, so on. This is about to get even more burdensome in bureaucracy and red tape because New South Wales are bringing in something called DPI, which is basically where the architect needs to supervise their builders for warranty and legal arse covering. That's the technical term. Number five, architecture at university is mostly conceptual, which is fun and engaging, but it will not teach you the business, practical application, and practice of architecture at a professional capacity. So when you start work, they're basically training you for the beginning, but at least you'll have a strong understanding of their design intentions, and hopefully work your way up the chain after 5 to 10 years, or remain what is sadly referred to as a CAD monkey, and that's where you're documenting other people's designs, and some people enjoy that. Number six, high competition to get into the architectural practice. Chances are you'll be another cog in the machine which will chew, exploit, and spit you out at their benefit, not yours. Generally, large practices are expected to behave this way, but not all, of course. For example, look at Grimshaw Architects at Glassdoor.com. That sounds pretty fantastic. I wouldn't complain with that. Just keep in mind, they may expect harsher working hours, so perhaps the salary is fair compared to someone else who may be working 40-hour weeks instead of 70. Number seven, when you start work, you will be a glorified draftsperson for a few years, maybe forever. And that touches back on number six, but don't be in a hurry is my advice to do anything with large responsibility. Number eight, now it's minimum wage for graduate architects in New South Wales, which may surprise you, and not in a good way. Your wage is essentially at the mercy of the Fair Work Ombudsman. The last 2 years have been better, as they adjust to inflation terms, which is probably on everyone's minds at this point. Before then, it was not looking too good, but hopefully wages start to increase to its fair value for what graduate architects do. Let's look into that. According to the 2022 Architects Award pay rates, this year, modern award rates will increase by 4.6%, subject to a minimum increase of $40 per week, based on 38 hours per week. Now, what makes this important is industry standard is a 40-hour working week at the minimum. So for some reason, your minimum wage is calculated at 30-hour working weeks. So when you are looking to be employed, just highlight that you will be working an extra 100 hours, which may not be reflected in the salary that is offered to you. And this is something that, unfortunately, many people may be falling prey to. This means that there is a proportionally higher increase in wage rates for lower paid employees. And that's true, I really do agree with that. If it weren't for these award rates increasing, there's not a chance that industry in general would lift the fair wage for a graduate architect. On the flip side, there may be companies that are struggling to pay their employees, in which case perhaps they shouldn't be hiring them in the first place. There's just some tough realities there. I've found this fantastic website, officedavesharp.com. I do not know who this is, but I really like their rundown of what a graduate architect can expect to be paid. When they refer to levels 1, 2, 3, just consider a level as a year. So the general idea is after a year, you move up to level 2 because you have taken on greater responsibilities at work. And that's not to say that the work may decide to bring you up a notch prematurely. Entry, you can expect $52,551 per annum, or $1,007 per week before tax. So after a year of good work, you can expect $55,330 per annum. Second pay point, so on your third year, $58,106. So that's based on a 38-hour week, not a 40 or beyond. Keep that in mind. So, I don't think I need to cover that because I already explained it, but feel free to read it. Minimum rates for full-time students. Under the Architect Award, you're a student while you're enrolled in a full-time course of architecture and you're employed to gain experience in the practice of architecture. Students are entitled to a percentage of what an entry-level graduate earns based on your age and experience. So, salaries for students under 21 years of age, excluding super, which, by the way, they must pay you. So I worked for a company as a casual and they refused to pay me super. I demanded it. They didn't employ me after that, but they did pay me my super. So try and clarify if you're working for an honest company before you engage with them. The first 13 weeks of employment, expect 352 per week. Next 13 weeks, 503. Next 26 weeks of employment. Okay, so after 6 months, you can expect $650 per week at 38 hours a week. Second year of experience. Okay, so now these go up in increments, and these are just based on when you're over 21. After you have turned 21, you're paid the full award rate. So everything else before 21 is at a discount, which in my opinion is nonsense, but that's how it is. What is a year of experience? When I was studying, I thought that it meant that if I'm in third year of my degree, I have 3 years of experience, right? Wrong. A year of experience means a minimum of 30 hours per week of employment over a 12-month period. Okay, salaries for students over 21 years of age. They have less than 3 years of experience, and they can expect $740 per week before tax. Third year of experience, 75%. Fourth year of experience, 85, 90, 95. Whew, it's just nasty. What about part-time and casual? The most common situation for a student is to do 1 or 2 days a week in an architecture firm. That's what I did. But the difference between being casual and part-time means a lot to your bank account. A part-time employee works less than 38 hours each week and usually works regular hours. You will sign an employment contract and you'll be entitled to do the same entitlements as a full-time employee, such as sick leave, annual leave, and specific rules around how you can be let go. So keep in mind, when you're casual, you are being paid 25% over the going rate, minimum award rate, but they can tell you not to come into work on the day, and you'll have to listen to that. But then there's also the freedom that comes with casual work, which I personally really enjoyed. But the flip side of that, again, is a full-time contract is safe. But keep in mind, you're getting paid 25% less for that first year, but you'll have to tolerate that, and then after a year, hopefully your hard work goes noticed, and you can start receiving a salary worth your time. What about overtime? If you work more than 38 hours in a week, you are entitled to overtime. Keep in mind, unfortunately, a lot of employers specify that they get to tell you what overtime is. What this implies is they may give you more than you can chew in time. So let's say you plan on working 8 hours in a day. They give you something that will take 10 hours, but they will pay you for those 8 hours and then tell you that those extra 2 hours are on you. You should have finished it in 8. That can happen, and this is how exploitation is very easy to slip into. Paid overtime is given at a rate of time and a half. So say you worked 3 extra hours, 41 hours total in a week, you would take your normal hours rate weekly for your experience divided by 38 and multiply it by 1.5, then by 3. Essentially, don't expect to ever be paid overtime unless they ask you to come in for a weekend. You have to set some boundaries up. I've heard terrible stories about employers just messing around with people's time, and you don't want to be in that position unless you really love it and you don't want to be doing anything else. In that case, go for it. But I still think you should value your time and what you offer to a company. It's a sad fact that a lot of firms don't follow the rules by avoiding paying overtime. If that's the case in your firm and the discussion doesn't change the situation, you can get advice or report them to Fair Work here. Yep, so you can always lodge a complaint to Fair Work Trading Commissions and say, I'm being underpaid, and hopefully something can come of it. But when you do that, they'll probably stop employing you soon after. So it is a difficult game. The other alternative is time off in lieu instead of payment for overtime, which means that for every hour of overtime you work, you get 1.5 hours of time off. Time off must be taken within 6 months at a time agreed to by both you and your employer. So that's fair. That's more common than being paid overtime. I don't think they do 1.5 times. It's typically hour for hour, so a 1-to-1 ratio. Okay, superannuation, it's basically, well, this says 9.5% of your earnings. I think it might be 10.5% now. Perhaps this is outdated, but maybe I'm misinformed. So I highly recommend looking at the rest of this website. I hope that was fun to listen to. If you still want to study architecture for whatever crazy reason, knowing all this, then I believe you actually will love and not regret the decision to take on architecture. And you will become an excellent architect, and you will get registered. So long as you know this, and it doesn't freak you out, and you're up to the challenge, and you just have this dying urge to build something that will last 500 years, 2,000 years, hopefully not 40 years, which is the Australian standard. I really believe that you should do this. Just know, it's not roses. Talk to you next time.